What?
Hello. Welcome, welcome. It's been way too long since we did a movie commentary. Yeah, I'm Nick. I'm here with Malik, and we're going to do a commentary for Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. My stated mission here, as discussed a couple of days ago, is to talk Malik into loving this movie because he has a lot of conflicting thoughts on it. We'll see if I succeed. But if you want to watch the movie along with this commentary track, then you should get your copy or Disney Plus or whatever to timestamp 0. And since we're both good to go, start the movie in 3, 2, 1. So, you want to talk some about how you felt first seeing this movie and how thoughts may have changed since then or what? Cuz I came out of this movie. There's a video about this on my channel that you can see. It's called Outdated, where my first out of the theater thoughts were like, I love the first and third act so much and the second act just dies. But since making that video, I just my opinion of this movie has only increased. How do
Um,
you
so,
how yeah, first viewing and since.
so for me, this was my most anticipated film of Phase Four. When I found out Wanda was going to be a big part, and we were going to be doing multiverse, I was hoping she would end up being the main antagonist. Um, and in a lot of ways, that stuff is pretty satisfying. Um, I'm of two minds about how we end things with her. Um, but yeah, overall, I thought it's okay. It didn't live up to my expectations on a first viewing. I felt like America Chavez is largely just a walking, living plot device that the movie wants me to care about way more than I do, and isn't doing sufficient legwork to get me at all invested in this dynamic between her and Strange. Um, that was my initial takeaway, and particularly with the ending, I really liked the sense that we were gonna have a Strange that was gonna have to deal with real consequences for his actions, with the third eye popping up,
Mhm.
and then for us to do that post credit scene that kind of deflates it, and he's just fine now. I'm like, I don't know about this.
Yeah.
Um,
I capital L love this movie, but I have I want to say like 5 or 6 specific choices that it makes that I don't care for, and that is probably top of the list.
and I was expecting this film to be. I guess I was expecting for it to handle the multiverse stuff a lot differently. Like I was expecting for this to quote unquote matter more to the to the larger universe. And in some ways, I appreciate how personal this story tries to be. Um, while also, I don't feel like multiverse as a concept is taken advantage of as much as it should be.
I get that, and I think that that kind of brings up two different points. One is like, did this movie take advantage of the concept of the multiverse in a satisfying way? I personally feel yes, because to me, what makes the multiverse interesting as a story device is like holding up a mirror to the characters in the story, and this movie does a lot of that. So I wasn't someone who like needed like Multiverse of Madness to be indicative of, oh, we're gonna explore like tons and tons of different like crazy universes. Like that would have been cool, but I'm not gonna dock the movie points for not being that. And secondly, the issue of it mattering more, I think it's still just too early for us to call that because, like, you can never really tell with these movies what's going to quote unquote matter when we get to like the big climactic Avengers thing. Because I don't think pre Avengers Endgame coming out, any of us would have expected Thor the Dark World to matter as much as it did. Like that movie was borderline inconsequential for like 5, 6 years. But yeah, speaking of America Chavez, something that I was surprised to hear because I listened to the writer director commentary for this movie like a couple days ago in preparation for this. I was surprised to hear that they'd been trying to get America Chavez into the MCU for like a decade, like since 2013. They'd been looking for like where's the perfect place to put this character, and they're like, this is a movie about the multiverse. Makes sense to put her here. Let's finally get her in.
Yeah, that's I find that a bit odd, given that I'm not at all satisfied with what little that they give her to do here. Like I just she's a walking plot device, and she's not like this isn't this should be on the level of like Joel and Ellie in The Last of Us. Like I should be invested, and I'm just not.
I don't think it needs to be on that level. I think she's a fine support for Strange, where this because like the thing about The Last of Us is that Joel and Ellie are both very much co-protagonists. So you need that relationship to be as deep and complex and emotionally powerful as it is because they're both leading the story ostensibly. Here, America is a supporting character to Strange, and she spends a lot of screen time with him, and the plot kind of is dictated by her. But this is very much still Strange's story. And we're going to, like, one of the big complaints that I hear less now, but that I heard a lot when this movie was being more discoursed around is that people are like, it feels more like it's Wanda's movie than Strange. And, like, I don't agree with that assessment at all.
Yeah,
I
I don't either.
yeah, I think this is a movie that's very laser focused on the journey of its protagonist. And I think America's interesting and I'd like to see more of her. But in the confines of this movie, she's here for Strange's story.
For me, I need more in emotional investment for this to matter. She can't just be a walking plot device.
I don't think she is, and we'll talk some more about that as we get more of her character, but I get what you mean, but there's like a wide berth between Ellie from The Last of Us and Walking Plot Device, and I feel like she's in that middle space. This
Fair.
conversation is, as has been pointed out many times, awkward to have at someone's wedding, but when else are you gonna have it?
Yeah, when else are you going to talk about it? Um, and I appreciate this immensely. Um, this scene, and like later on when he's talking to Dark Strange about his regrets, like it's really powerful, like emotional stuff for this character.
And it feels like I hesitate to say this, but like adult dialogue in a way that we don't often get from so many of these protagonists who are kind of like emotionally stunted and always like obfuscating. Here, I like that more so than in the first movie, where he does have like that egotism is very much like he's got all these walls put up. Here, this movie is still about how Stephen Strange has walls put up, but he talks about his feelings very frankly, and it feels like I am watching a conversation between two adults.
This is epic. This whole like
Yes.
transfer into the costume suit up thing,
Yep.
so cool.
And like the way this movie looks, like this is one of the better looking Marvel movies, I think, especially recently, just as far as the color grade and like the dynamic shots. and you can really feel Sam Raimi behind the camera.
Which is the thing that I was most excited about. Being a big fan of obviously his Spider-Man trilogy, and even a lot of his work in horror. He's got a very strong, dynamic style visually.
Yeah. I something I never would have put together until I'd heard it, but which knowing it is kind of recognizable is that this is not New York. This is a set that they built in England. There's two sets that they use throughout this whole like 5 6 minute sequence. This whole stretch is a set in England, and after they kill the thing, the rest of the scene is a different set that they built in LA, and it's just very, very impressive.
Yeah, I think working with your limitations and being able to create like a real established world, it's really impressive. I'm definitely more impressed with it here than I am in um No Way Home, just because there's some notable shots and scenes in No Way Home where I can tell people are standing on a blue screen.
Yeah, especially since maybe not more than No Way Home, this is apparently the Marvel project that was most directly impacted by COVID. Like, we're gonna get to some scenes where it's like, we've got 5 or 6 characters in a room together, and those actors were not on set at the same time at all.
That's got to be a logistical nightmare.
Yeah. And, before we get too far away from it, uh, the big, like, thematic character thing throughout this movie started with that conversation with Christine where it's like the whole "Are you happy?" thing, and Strange says yes, and this was something that I got a different angle on it listening to the director commentary that I didn't really ever considered, because my take watching the movie has always been that Steven says, "Of course I'm happy," like, knowing that he's, like, talking out of his ass that he's lying, and that he's saying that to make Christine feel better, basically. It's like, yeah, don't worry about me, I'm fine." But apparently the way that Raimi and Cumberbatch both, were going for it is more that he legitimately had just never actually considered the question before that conversation. Like, the idea that he's lying for her sake so she can comfortably move on, but prior to that interaction, he'd never stopped and thought for a second and realized, "Oh, I'm not happy. Huh." And that's why when we get later into the movie, we'll see the darker Strange who did not get this diversion with the giant monster and who just went back home and sat down with that question and just spiraled.
I think he's definitely. I mean, both things are true for sure.
Yeah,
Obviously,
I
he's.
always took it as him being more aware of how unhappy he was prior to that discussion.
It's funny. I think honestly, I think the opposite. I actually, the more I think about it, I do read it how they were intending it, because ever since he's got these powers and become this sorcerer, he hasn't really had time to think about anything outside of that. Like he's been the sorcerer. He hasn't had any type of. He hasn't even attempted the normal life balance that someone like Spider-Man attempts to. He's been squarely focused in all this supernatural stuff.
Yeah. Ooh, nasty.
Very Sam Raimi.
And like I love that he's he's a guy who really wants to take advantage of the sense of magic that Strange has. And again, that's a complaint that I saw that I never agreed with. And oh, we're in the LA set now. But the idea that like it's such uncreative uses of magic. And I'm like, I get it if you want to see more, but just from that sequence alone, I had this immediate thought in the theater of like, oh, we're being more fun with the magic than we had been previously. Because I feel like under Scott Derrickson or the Russos, this same sequence might have played out where it's just like kind of orange telekinesis and like just orange energy where he grabs a pole or he grabs a car. But I like that Raimi goes a different way with it, where it's like, no, he'll make giant hands to go grab the lamppost, or he'll make a giant cat head come out of a portal to eat this car, and that's how he saves a woman. Like that stuff's really creative to me.
Yeah, definitely stronger choices than like your typical energy beam type stuff.
Yeah. And when we get to like the multi-headed snake thing he makes later.
We're obviously we're going to talk about Zombie Strange later, but that was very interesting because I remember first seeing that in the trailer and thinking that that's a version of Strange that he's going to have to fight later. Um, but making himself like an undead Strange to go up against somebody like Wanda, I thought that was really cool.
Yeah, that was yeah, we'll get to like the specifics, but for the most part, the whole possessing the dead strange thing was Michael Waldron's idea.
Oh,
Yeah, it's really interesting, like learning specific things or like what's Waldron's ideas, what's Raimi's ideas, and what's Cumberbatch, because Cumberbatch was pretty involved creatively.
that's nice to hear. You
Mm.
can definitely. I mean, I think one of the stronger aspects of this movie um, is that like emotionality and regret that Strange feels in that he's never really thought about actively trying to pursue any kind of normalcy outside. Like this is he was like this established surgeon before taking on these powers to get the use of his hands back, and he took in the ancient one's advice and let that part of him go. Um,
Hmm.
but he hadn't even realized that there is still a hole, like there is still a void in his life, and like it's Christine. I think maybe even a part of him still misses being that renowned surgeon, and he hasn't really replaced it with anything. Like this, just being a superhero, it clearly is not enough. He's never taken the time to self-analyze and think that through, but that's clearly not enough.
Yeah. And I forgot to mention that there's a deleted scene that was originally going to open the movie, like that was going to be our opening instead of going straight into the dream sequence, where it's Christine and Strange like back before his accident, and they're giving a TV interview, and it's the first time he says the holding the knife thing, where he's like, look, I may be a jerk, you may be trying to like paint me in this news interview like I'm a bad guy, but I'm competent, I'm a genius. When your loved one is the one whose life is in danger, I'm the one you want holding the knife.
Oh, so it would have made what she says later, I I guess, more poignant because that typical phraseology we would have heard earlier on in the beginning.
Yeah, it's using his own words against him, basically.
Yeah, but if you have any kind of strong memory in regards to that first movie, that line still hits pretty strong. Um, God, that effect was so cool.
Yeah. Getting the WandaVision cue in there was a very hype moment for me in the theater.
Same. But also I realized I could kind of tell in the theater um, like who had seen WandaVision and who hadn't when this
Yeah.
scene started. Everyone who's like not like there was like almost like there was one guy I remember when I saw it on first viewing who started cheering, and then everyone else kind of looked at him like he was crazy and just quickly down. Uh, and there were other people that were saying like "aw" and like giggling and crying and stuff. And I'm like, okay, yeah, these people saw WandaVision.
Hmm. Which was like releasing as they were making this movie, and I don't think anyone making the movie was expecting that show to like take off quite the way it did.
Um, See, I to be honest with you, I'm not so sure about that. Um, I am very interested in, since you listened to the commentary, what their thought process was in getting her to this place before the movie even starts. Um,
Well, they've been pretty open about it. Like the reasoning that they give in the commentary is the same that they give in like interviews, which is basically Raimi and Waldron both agreeing that like we're gonna have Scarlet Witch in our movie. She's basically on a precipice where like she's pretty close to like Breaking Bad already. Do we want to like set that up in our movie and leave the chance for some other filmmaker or some other writer to do evil Scarlet Witch? No, we want to do that ourselves. So we're going to jump to it.
and that's the other thing. People say this is a jump. Um, I'm not so sure I believe that. I mean, when we're left with her at the end of WandaVision, I had gotten the impression that, like, she makes the sacrificial choice. She lets all the people go, she leaves. But at the very, very end with that book, the book is signaling to me, and like her studying it and everything, the book is sending me a very sinister message.
Yeah,
That she, at the end of the day, she still wants these kids back, and she's gonna do whatever it takes to make that happen.
yeah. And like even taking that scene with the Darkhold out of it, I think WandaVision deliberately ends with Wanda in this very gray, very nuanced, very ambiguous place where she could be like on the path to redemption afterwards, or she could be on the path to getting much, much worse. And it's fascinating to see the way that different people react to it because I see some people online say things like this movie is a total betrayal of WandaVision. That show ended with her redeeming herself. And on the other end, I'll see people going like, what are you talking about? WandaVision was basically her villain origin story. And I think the show deliberately wanted to end in such a way where her next appearance could go one way or the other. And I think some people just read it much more definitively one way or the other than it was intended.
My stomach dropped when this moment happened.
It's
I
so
was like,
good.
"Oh my god, they're doing it."
And like one of
She's
those little like things that they mentioned in the commentary that like really struck me is like, man, people really do not understand the amount of effort on just little tiny stupid things that go into this movie. All of those trees, all of those blossoms were put there one by one on those trees by like people working on set.
Yeah, I heard about that too. The attention to detail really matters, and that's and for only like what, 2.5, 3 minutes of film.
Mhm.
But that's incredible. That's absolutely incredible. And Elizabeth Olsen is has become one of my favorite actors alive, actresses alive, working in the
Mhm.
business, between all the work she's done here and um Love and Death, and that, I think there's some other Facebook show. I can't remember the name of it, but like it's about her grieving the loss of her husband and realizing that her husband wasn't even who she thought he was, and she's just so good
Mm.
in everything. She's crushing it in everything right now.
This bit where she mentions the fact that Strange is the one who gave Thanos the Time Stone, I love that, and that's such a great like, I would have emphasized that even more, like even if just with another line of dialogue where like you don't think about that watching Infinity War and Endgame, but when she brings it up, it's like, yeah, naturally, that would be a sore point for her, and she would have all the reason in the world to feel antagonistic towards Strange. Like, Vision dying twice in front of her is pretty close to directly Strange's fault, and she would hold that against him. And so, in a way, like, Strange has some degree of responsibility, however unintentionally, for the events of WandaVision, for her like complete mental breakdown. Like he played a role in that.
Yeah, I get what you're saying too. Like I wish that that was more pronounced in this film. Like I wish she was more um yeah, that should be a sore point that she pushes more. Like this is your fault. Like my situation is your fault.
Because the thing is, I think the dynamic between them is great, and we get these two really, really great conversations with them pretty close to each other, and then they don't really get the chance to like have a back and forth like that again. And I understand how that worked out the way it did, but just I love Olsen and Cumberbatch like just dueling performances, and the way that like my take on their like thematic relationship has always been that like if this movie is about Steven finally admitting to himself that he's not happy and that, like you said, there is that hole in his life, like he can't even admit it to himself until near the end of the movie. Whereas Wanda is just open and blatant about it, and she is desperately trying to fill the hole. And like they have the same problem, but in their approaches are totally opposite, where Strange, like we'll see through his variants, like the danger that comes from denying that you have a hole that needs filling in the first place. And Wanda is the opposite extreme, where it's the danger of trying to fill it just desperately at the expense of everything else.
Right. Yeah. I really really love that for the majority of this film like Wanda is essentially a horror movie villain. Like by the end of this scene, we're gonna realize that, like, oh yeah, Strange just cannot beat her. Like he
Mm.
literally just cannot beat her. There's nothing in his bag of tricks that can stop Wanda. So
And
he
I
has
will
to just run from her.
Yeah, and I will say that's another complaint that I sympathize with, which is that we could have showcased that bag of tricks a bit better. But like I like what we get to see him do, but there is a part of me that goes, it does feel like compared to the guy that we saw fight Thanos 2 movies ago, he could go a little bit harder than he is in combating her.
Yeah, I get that he doesn't want to kill her, but um yeah, that's definitely a valid complaint. I could see us going harder with the magic than we do. Just I mean that's been a complaint people like Eric and a number of other fans of the comics have been lobbing at these movies since the very first one.
Yeah, I mean, I think that complaint is more about what I was talking about earlier, which this movie fixes, is just like making the magic feel weird and fantastical and magical as opposed to just like energy blasts. But they could definitely go harder as far as like the efforts that it seems like he's putting into to stop her. And this is that moment that I think really highlights the difference between them, where she had that line earlier where she's like, I know what self-deception looks like. I know that you're not happy. I know what would make you happy. And she just says it, and he has no response, really. She's like, I'll send you somewhere where you can be with Christine. He like backs up and is like, we're gonna stop you. Like he can't even continue that line of conversation. It's so painful for him.
Oh yeah, he can't, and you can see the tear in his eye. Like
Hmm.
he refuses to even entertain the notion. He can't.
And you can see, for as crazy as her actions are, with all the baggage that she has, when she's like, "This is me being reasonable," she's like, "Well, yeah, she didn't have to come here to have a negotiation first. She didn't have to ask. She didn't even have to send monsters after her. She could have just came in like she's like, I'm leaving this reality anyway. She could have killed whoever she felt like to start with, just grab this girl and be on her way. And you can see where she's like, okay, you drove me to this point. Like, obviously, she's not correct, but you can see where her head's at.
Um, I think the other thing that doesn't help with the complaints against how how standard and blase a lot of comic book fans think the magic is presented in these films is just looking at, all these other people at Carmitage. Like they all have these very standard looking weapons and
Yeah.
arrows, like arrows, swords.
With the
Um,
way that, like, we see the first film, you'd think that we'd be in a place where most, or at least some of these guys, could be doing stuff on Strange's level, and just none of them do.
yeah, they're just cannon fodder. It's hard for me to buy that any of them know how to do anything beyond just these rudimentary, um, protection spells.
It's a great shot, though.
Yeah, that's awesome.
If Elizabeth Olsen was whispering stuff in my ear, I'd do what she said too.
I don't know anyone who wouldn't.
I also want to briefly bring up the score for this movie, which I really like, even though it does that annoying thing that we do in these movies whenever we switch composers mid franchise, where they stop using the main theme.
Yeah, I don't even remember what the main theme of the OG Doctor Strange even sounds like.
It plays a couple of times, very briefly. It's the dun 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 dun.
Oh, yeah.
Like, it pops up in No Way Home, like only a couple of months before this movie, because Giacchino was scoring that one also. So it's weird to have that in a Spider-Man movie, but not Strange's own sequel. Like, it played when he did the outfit swap, and there's like one or two other moments where it very briefly plays, but I would have liked to have more like bombast. The Guardians Volume 3 does the same thing, and it's unfortunate.
I think I agree with that criticism more with Guardians,
Yeah.
specifically because for me the score and the music in general just matters more to those films. And it would have been like, and there's a specific spot in the movie where it makes sense to bring back that original theme that they just don't do. They bring it back for this weird standalone bit with
Yeah.
Rocket, but not when the team is just owning the High Evolutionary at the end.
Yeah. Which, I mean, that scene goes by pretty quick, so it
It
would have had
does,
to have been a
but you
big
would
chunk.
definitely get like all the major notes in
Yeah,
that scene, and this stuff is really cool.
yeah.
And credit where credit is due. There is some inventive stuff with the magic and Wanda done here. This is some of my favorite bits of that in the film.
I also wanna say, before I forget to mention it, that I adore this costume.
Oh yeah, this is. I remember just seeing the WandaVision version at the end of that show and just be like, oh my god, she has the thing, she has the tiara, she's got it, she looks great.
And they
Um,
leveled it up for this one.
yep, it's even more dark, more sinister. The sleeves are awesome, very, very witch-like.
I like the texture on the, like, corset, like, upper body thing where, like, it's got this, I don't know, almost. like glassy look to it.
Oh, that's so Evil Dead. Those camera shots.
Yeah, yup.
Yeah, really, really, really bringing in the horror, doubling down on the horror. The Dutch angle, so good.
Hmm. And you know, some people say that this movie could have gone harder in the horror direction, but I
It could
really
have.
like it. It could have, but I like that it's not a horror movie at all when Wanda's not on screen. And then when she is on screen, it goes hard in that direction.
Oh yeah, yeah. Oh my God, this is awesome.
God.
Ugh, like a demon. It's so cool.
Yeah, I will say that for as much as like you can mention the like it makes her a plot device thing, I like having America be like the gateway to the multiverse because it allows the stakes to feel both small and absolutely massive. Or like this is another superhero movie that's really just about making sure that we keep one person safe, and it's kind of got like Terminator 2 vibes in that sense. But also, again, like Terminator 2, like if we lose this one person, then countless other lives could be endangered by Wanda. And like she makes a big show out of like, no, once I get what I want, everything's gonna be fine. But like you've got a track record of snapping over a number of things and purposely or otherwise getting a lot of people hurt.
Um, it's interesting because WandaVision is a much less like blatant way of hurting people. Like she has people trapped in this like loop of doing the same thing over and over and giving people like a lot of physical trauma where they're like away from their loved ones, they have no bodily autonomy. Um, but for the most part, she didn't physically hurt these people. So it's not inherently the same thing as some big cataclysm or even what she does in the comics with House of M, where
Or
she just
stuff that she indirectly leads to in Civil War or Age of Ultron.
oh, I mean the Civil War where she does actually like accidentally kill like a whole like building's worth of people. Yeah,
Yeah, the
that's
dignitaries.
it's interesting going back to this now. Um okay, yeah, with this is so a lot of these this movie's detractors call this the worst scene in the film. Um,
Because it's the one that was in all the trailers, and I
no,
guess
not
that's
even that. Um, because we don't spend sufficient time in these different universes.
yeah, I think that's because this was in a lot of the marketing and people were expecting like the movie to go harder in exploring these places because why else would we see this bit in the trailers? I don't know. I'm just not bothered about it.
I think people were. This goes back to a point that I was actually going to make. We get this movie. People are unsatisfied largely with how multiverse is handled, and then everyone looks at everything everywhere all at once and is like, "This is what that movie should have been."
And like it's going for such a different thing. Like I get it in the sense that if you want a movie that's all about exploring the multiverse, that one spends more time in drastically different universes. Like whole scenes will take place in like 5 or 6 different realities. So like I get it in that sense. Also, the vomiting into the chimney was Cumberbatch's idea on the day.
um,
And on
let's
this
see.
viewing, it's really hitting me for the first time when she's like, "You saved me." Like on other viewings, I always thought, like, okay, why are we making such a big deal out of that? Like, of course he saved her. Well, like, no, she would be surprised at that because the last time she was in that near exact same situation, the other Strange tried to murder her. Like, that's our first inkling as to like when we get to the conclusion, like, this Strange is fundamentally different to the other ones in some way. Like with America, like zero point 0.5 seconds away from Wanda getting what she wants, he decides to save her rather than like the needs of the many just end her then and there. Because it would be like a purely pragmatic, like cold blooded way to solve the problem is just kill her in that room.
Completely utilitarian, yeah.
Croissants. I think
Yeah,
they definitely achieved what they were going for with this world, which is like an Earth that's just off enough from ours to be noticeable, but not like a big deal.
right.
Like the black and white fashion was an interesting choice.
Um, I remember. So when we get to like her stepping on the pad and the memories thing, I'm like, okay, so this is kind of the Fast and Furious level of trying trying to get me to care about this character in a very ham-fisted, obvious way. That's just not working.
That scene is one of my five problems, where it's like it's the clunkiest bit of screen. Like I vehemently disagree with people who are just like, "Oh, this movie's well directed, but it has a really bad screenplay." I think it has a really strong, really clever screenplay. And then there's one or two moments like that that really stick out as like we needed to get this backstory in here. We needed to remind the audience of the strange Christine relationship, and it just feels so oddly inserted and weird and clunky, and it's like, huh.
I feel omega level cringe every time I sit through it. Like I'm like this and this I'm just gonna be honest with how I feel. It's just a bad scene. It's a
I
really bad scene.
agree it's a bad scene, but there's nothing in it that makes me cringe. It just takes me out of the movie because it's just like, why are we stopping here? And we're gonna have this bit of like, you're right, this is a waste of time. It's like you guys are voluntarily standing here to watch this, and like once it starts playing and he's looking at it and he's kind of like lost in the moment, I get that, but why stop on the pad to begin with?
Yeah, it's just really forced. And this bit here is clearly just to remind people who don't know the significance of the watch.
And like to be fair, it does give us information that we didn't have before because from the first movie we didn't know that that watch was a gift from her. So like, no wait, yeah we did. What am I talking about? It's engraved. So like we really don't need to see the giving of the watch because if you remember the first movie, you know it's from her. So I don't know. And like the thing with her sequence that bothers me is different because I don't know how else you like naturally have this character who doesn't want to talk about this like bring this up. But the thing that bothers me here is like I get what they're going for, which is that the thing that scares her and activates her powers for the first time is this incredibly mundane thing. And like the trauma isn't the thing that scares her, the trauma is the result. And she would naturally blame herself because it's not like anything big happened to her to activate her powers. Like she saw a bee and her instincts basically separated her from her mom's. Like I get what that's going for, and I think in theory it works, but at the same time, there's a part of my brain that's just like, I feel like it should have been a bigger deal. Like I feel like it should have been something aside from just a bee lands on her and then that makes this thing happen. Like, you know what I mean? Like I'm having this thing where I can see the merit in the choice, but also I'm not, it's not landing.
Yeah, it just doesn't work. It just doesn't work. Um,
I do
and
like giving him that moment of comforting her over it, and that's like what I will say about their dynamic is that like it's no Joel and Ellie, but you can see how he's grown as a character from his first movie because first movie Strange would not be able to comfort this girl in her moment of need like that.
absolutely not. He would just kind of look at her, roll his eyes, and walk away.
He'd give her the awkward side hug that he gives that one guy.
Yeah, that's the best you're getting out of 2016 Strange. The MCU in general has been, pushing towards more comic book accurate um, costumes, and I really appreciate that. Like this costume looks phenomenal.
Yeah, like I remember thinking back in 2016 that it wouldn't get much better than the costume from the first movie, but like the sort of replacing the kind of camouflage like robes with something that's just a little bit more suit like is really cool. And it's got like that emblem on the front.
And a brighter color palette.
Yeah, I really love the color palette of this movie. Like, I think just as far as just like if you were to take a screenshot from this movie, it's my favorite looking of the MCU movies as far as just the color grade goes.
Now another big issue I have um, with this movie, obviously our friend here, because
Mordo.
yeah, when we're left at the end of the first movie with the original, and like he's clearly going to be a major antagonist. I'm like, okay, cool. Like I'm interested to see where this character goes, and like he and the ancient one had like this really interesting kind of moral uh like philosophical like difference that he sees Strange kind of enabling. um we don't get any interesting follow-up with that. The OG character isn't in this film, and we have this replacement who has a quasi similar ish relationship with the previous Strange, but this isn't that same character. So it just, I don't know, the way all this stuff is handled. I'm not a big fan of this.
I'm 100% okay with it because I can't imagine a place for Mordo in this movie that isn't just the place that they originally gave him in the deleted scene, which is naturally he would consider Wanda the biggest threat of all the people in this movie, try to take her on by himself and get killed. And that was going to be the whole thing. Or like the first we see of Wanda in this movie, it's Mordo, like 616 Mordo, finding her and being like, the bill comes due. And she beheads him basically and presents his head to Strange. And they didn't include that because it was eating up too much time and they felt like it was distracting from the meat of the story. And frankly, I'm just fine with not checking up on Mordo at all in this movie because I just don't think there's a place for him here in this narrative the way we chose to tell it. And I'd rather, if the choices are saving him for next time or killing him here, I'd rather save him for next time and just hope we don't do a Modoc with him and like actually follow up thematically on what made him interesting in the first movie.
Or even worse, pull a scorpion from Far From Home and just not use him at all and just forget about it.
Yeah, I mean, Scorpion still at least can show up, but I mean, like, you think about the prospect of bringing the bad guy from the first movie back after a lot of time has passed, and maybe he ends up being very different from how you remember him. And that's basically what they do with MODOK, but they don't then build on his role in the first movie at all. Like, it really might as well be a different guy.
so yeah, I can be made okay with this choice if we make him the villain of the third film and really flesh that stuff out.
Yeah, I'm gonna be fine with it regardless because I just feel like if I'm Raimi or Waldron making this movie and I'm trying to find a place for him and he just doesn't fit in, I'm not gonna force him in.
That's fair. I'm just, you know what? Yeah, given the circumstances, I'm fine with this.
Like, I
But
totally get where you're coming from because it's just such a promising idea, but, time and a place for everything.
it also gives credence to a lot of MCU detractors that are like, these post credit scenes don't matter anyway. Why would I
Mm,
stick around for them?
that's true. But then if I were making the first Doctor Strange movie, that would be one of the things that I don't make a post-credit scene. I'd have that be just the end of the movie. Maybe not though. I say that, but I want to immediately retract that because I think the way that movie ends is perfect. So never mind.
Um, I really liked that POV shot. That also reminded me of Evil Dead. They
Yep,
do that for a lot of the possession stuff.
this whole sequence is great.
Oh, that's creepy as hell.
And the way that they talk about this scene in the commentary is a little weird. Specifically, this bit that we're gonna see with like the storm inside of a teacup, because the way that I figured you were always meant to read that is that like 838 Wanda is actively hallucinating, and that's just part of 616 Wanda invading her mind. But they
Mhm.
say this weird thing in the commentary where they're like, that's just one of the ways that this world is different. Like, you could just have a storm inside of a teacup.
Yeah, I don't see how that makes any sense
So
whatsoever.
weird.
Especially since like we never get to see like this actual universe outside of Wanda's house.
And I really like, again, to Elizabeth Olsen's performance, we just had like a solid 2 minutes of screen time where our Wanda is this terrifying presence, and we've been in 838 Wanda's shoes, utterly scared of her, and like she stares at the audience, and it's this really off-putting fourth wall breaking moment. And then in the space of a second, she turns around to go about her business and she hears her boys calling her, and she snaps right back to being like sympathetic human mom. Also, there's a okay, so something that they said about 838 that I do think is nice is that they have an Oswald the Lucky Rabbit cartoon playing behind them. And the
Hmm.
idea was that in this world, as opposed to our world slash 616, Oswald is the Disney mascot that took off and got super successful.
Huh. Okay.
Also, hooray, I managed to talk over the ice cream song, which is another choice that I don't care for. Like a very realistic, cringy kids asking for something, but also, ugh. That's you want to talk about cringe. That's the one scene in this movie that actively makes me cringe.
um, I wait a minute. She gets killed, doesn't she?
Yes, like right now.
Oh, this isn't funny, but it is kind of funny.
Because I mean, Wong's like, it'll kill you, and she's like, yeah, you gotta do something though.
Yeah, this is debatably. I mean, like people. I don't even. So this isn't a thing that people still talking about, but I don't know if you remember. Oh, that's a super cool. These are super cool parallel shots. Very very rarely do you see direct parallels like this in film. But so people, I don't know if you remember the whole like sacrificial death with what's his name in X-Men First Class. Um,
Darwin, yeah.
yeah.
I was
Um,
just thinking about that last night because Brianna and I were watching him in Twilight.
oh God. um, but yeah, for whatever reason, like the big like sacrificial death of minor black character, like here it's aggressively funny. It's like for no, I don't know why I find it so funny.
I Yeah, I can't. I definitely don't have that.
I guess it's just because she's so eager about it. Whereas with Darwin, he's trying to help. He thinks he can pull one over on this guy, and then he's tragically killed. But with this chick, like she just goes for it. She's like, I'm just gonna do it, and then she just
Mm,
stabs the thing, and it's one of the most unintentionally funny moments in the entire movie.
yeah, I definitely don't have that.
It's, it's yeah, but this is fucked up.
Yeah,
And there are people that really connected to WandaVision, um, particularly a lot of female audiences that did not appreciate um taking her down this path. I I love this for two reasons. Um, I've always wanted to see them make her a villain and still have her. I mean, obviously, at the end of the day, like I think if you have a soul, like you still sympathize with Wanda despite all the heinous shit that she's doing.
yeah,
Um, but at the same time, this is bold. This is interesting. This is breaking the mold. This is something you don't see in the average comic book film, like a character that we've lived with for so long in this franchise going down this kind of path,
yeah.
murdering people.
It's one of those things that's like become so common in actual comic books that you don't really stop to think about how rarely you see it happen in movies, and it's even happened fairly often in TV, where it's like a straight up hero becoming villain story. We almost never do those in movies.
Yeah, the biggest one that comes to mind in television is Faith and Buffy.
Yeah, and I mean that's an original property.
Yeah, it's interesting and fresh territory. I think the trouble um that they're potentially gonna have is in whatever they do with Wanda moving forward. Trying to I guess try to pull her back. I mean that there is no coming back from murdering people. I could see a bunch of people crying foul if we just put her on the Avengers team again. So I'm interested to see how they handle Wanda moving forward because we all know she's not actually dead.
Yeah, I really like Cumberbatch in this scene because you can see, like, especially with where we open this movie and like he and his Christine, even if they never talk to each other again after that wedding, they've parted on like decent terms where they're able to be somewhat emotionally open with each other. And he's trying to approach this Christine with like some level of warmth, and she's just not receiving it at all.
And you can see how hurtful that is for Cumberbatch and his performance.
Yeah. Like, I don't know if he said it already, but the way that he delivers the line, like 838 Steven, is that some kind of cyborg me? Like, he's trying to have like a normal-ish conversation, and she's just very, very cold and direct about it.
kind of the inverse to their initial relationship in the first film.
Hmm.
I pay attention to a lot of like camera placement more so than I even usually have when watching films after being so close to like my own production, directing my own things, and seeing the merit in just letting the camera stay still.
Hmm.
And typically when like you're just letting an actor own a moment.
Yeah. When he comes in and says, "We're with the Illuminati," when I saw this with my mom, she had this moment where she was like flipping out, and I had to remind myself, it's like, "Oh yeah, the Illuminati's not just a thing in Marvel Comics. It's like a real life conspiracy that's pretty widely known about." And she thought that that was in reference to the actual Illuminati.
That's funny. That's hilarious, actually. I I really like Wong doesn't look cold at all, but I appreciate how real they were making that that look, how bitterly freezing it is, and Wanda's blinking her eyes like over and over and over again.
Another thing that I love about the costume that I haven't like articulated is that like it looks like something growing on her almost. Like it's got
It does.
almost that kind of symbiote suit vibe. It's like something like like it physically looks like her corruption in clothing form.
I was just gonna say the same thing. Yeah, something that's it definitely feels like something born out of living material.
Mhm. The shot coming up in a bit of the two of them like briefly facing the monsters together, putting that in the marketing was genius because that's what kept me in my theory is like maybe Wanda's gonna spend at least part of this movie as an ally. Maybe it's gonna be one of those like complicated, no real single villain scenarios.
It was definitely a smart choice for sure. And the way this stuff goes is pretty subversive.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I thought this was going to be like a whole another action scene, since we did see it in the trailer, and then it's like, oh no, this is Wanda's posse. Okay
And we
then,
don't
all right.
really ever have a big action scene with these guys. That's another thing where they did conceive of by the third act with Zombie Strange having a more involved fight with those big monsters, but it was just distracting too much from story.
Yeah, so we end up getting rid of them uh, more quickly.
The Ultron bots here are voiced by Ross Marquand, who did him in What If, and it's close enough. If you told me James it was James Spader, I would have believed you.
And the infamous Illuminati scene.
Yes. So here we go. This First of all, this is the scene I was talking about where none of these people are in the same room. Like all of them are shooting on different days for COVID reasons. And if you hadn't told me that, I never would have known. But yeah, this is where on first viewing, I kind of get stuck on just like the sense of fan service of it all and being like, the movie's like stopping in its tracks to just indulge in like, oh, I recognize that thing. But the more and more I watch the movie, the more things I find to appreciate in this scene. And another thing I was surprised to learn because, like, the narrative and the assumption, which I understand from a lot of people coming out of this, was like, oh, Raimi or Waldron or whoever must have got a mandate down from the studio that was like, include these cameos in the movie. And then they like kill them off as an act of defiance. No, this is all Waldron's idea. Like, he's like, we don't really have a second half of our act two. And so I just thought, why not do the Illuminati?
Um, I mean that doesn't give this story choice more credence just because the writer came up with it himself.
No, it
Um,
doesn't. But it does like defeat the sort of narrative that I think gets propagated a lot, that so much of these movies are driven by quote unquote mandates.
yeah, that's fair. Um, this is one of the big things I am conflicted about. Um, because it feels in a number of ways to me that this does feel like hollow fan service, and in other ways, this scene is somewhat necessary in setting up individuals that you buy actually could maybe potentially well actually no, the only person on this panel who I buy could like subdue Wanda is their version of Captain Marvel. um and even then Captain Marvel is taken out kind of too easily. Well, not even just too easily, she's killed by means that I'm like, yeah, Captain Marvel wouldn't die by that, but
Well,
okay.
the thing is, in the commentary, they deliberately point out that she's the only one who we don't know for sure is actually dead. So she could
Okay.
just be knocked
She's
out.
just incapacitated. Okay. Yeah,
Yeah.
that makes sense. Um,
And so the thing is, okay, I'll start with her because I have a couple of things I want to talk about, and Lashana Lynch is one of them because she's a great actress. And for a character who's basically a cameo, like 2, 3 minutes or less of screen time, the last time I watched this, I was like struck by how much I really like her performance, because the whole Illuminati, like the whole group, is doing this thing where, minus Xavier, they're all very deliberately, like Christine was, kind of cold and aloof and above it all. And you feel like that might be one degree of they're looking at their dead friend in front of them who they're like trying for multiversal crimes, and they're trying to be like very detached. But also maybe just when they talk about like they built a statue for their Strange and are lying to people, like the world populace is being lied to on the regular so that people don't lose their faith in them, basically. Like, they're kind of scary and off-putting, and you're not supposed to like them, and you're supposed to think like Strange does, that they're all kind of cold jerks, except for, again, Xavier. And Lashana Lynch as Captain Marvel is doing this thing where she, out of all of them, is doing the most like put on. Like, she's got such a I'm a big tough girl attitude, except for one line when they're talking about like the consequences of the incursion, and she's talking about how everyone in that universe died. And for that line and only that line, you can see the mask slip, and like she's actually horrified and doesn't want to think about this. And then she goes right back to like being the big tough one who's like, oh, we can handle whatever. And like John
um,
Krasinski, I get a similar thing with, because people were so gung ho for John Krasinski as Reed Richards until they actually got it, and then they were like, I don't like this performance. He seems kind of cold and stiff. And I think that's very much intentional.
that is intentional, and I'm like, okay, like I don't. This isn't a very good litmus test. It's really not because this scene and this movie is using him for a very specific, um, insinular kind of thing. He's not really given the range to to showcase anything and everything he could do in this role.
And I like getting this flashback like projection for two reasons. One is that I think it's a really clever way to like showcase for the audience Black Bolt's powers without just having like a little exposition or like contriving another brief fight sequence to show that. It's
Hmm.
like we want our beat with what mouth to land, but the audience who definitely does not know or care who Black Bolt is needs to know his powers first. And that's a really smart way to get that very cleanly into the script. And two, I like that between this and Dark Strange, who we're going to see later, we see what Strange corrupted by the Darkhold looks like, and it's not the same for him as it is for Wanda. And I think this plays into Cumberbatch's performance and Olsen's performance. Like Olsen is doing the most acting in this movie, where she's like swinging the most wildly from like extremes. But bits like that show that it's a character thing where Strange, even when he's maybe not as corrupted as Wanda was, but pretty corrupted, he's still pretty subdued and more reasonable and willing to like subject himself to punishment. And I think that very brief moment says something about the character.
I don't know if you saw the behind the scenes video of a much more brutal fight scene involving Wanda.
Yes,
Did-
I did.
And that was for this Illuminati scene, right?
I
Or
think that was
not
for the
not this specific.
Kamikaze stuff.
Oh, the Camertage. God, I know MCU can't get away with doing that exactly since those are human beings, but God, I wish they were able to do that. That would have been glorious.
Yeah. But yeah,
Um,
I think what ultimately salvages this sequence for me from being like as obtrusive as I used to think it was is just that it is being used to say things about Steven's character, and we are still ultimately focused on analyzing our protagonist even amongst all this like cameo stuff.
ugh, this is so good. I just I love the horror vibe that Sam Raimi's able to layer in here.
Yeah. Oh, something else I forgot to mention is that because this whole sequence was a relatively late addition to the script, they didn't have as much time to work on costumes as they did for the other costumes in the movie,
Mhm.
which is why Reed Richards' costume doesn't look quite as good as it could, and why Black Bolt's costume is entirely CGI. But like for last minute costumes, it was still pretty good.
Um, I mean, Reed's costume is CGI.
It is. I could have swore Black Bolt was the only one, but
Yeah, smartest guy in the world just tells Wanda that so she can fix it.
I don't have a problem with that because he has no reason to think that she could or would just delete someone's mouth. Like they have a Wanda Maximoff in their universe, and as far as we know, she's totally benign. So like, who
But that's the
knows?
thing. W- w- Um, Rambo says we can handle the Scarlet Witch. Like you know what she's actually capable of.
Yeah. So
Um,
like, clearly, the Wanda that they know is not as capable, or at least hasn't shown the capabilities that this one does.
but she can do everything our Wanda can. So like
I'm
that just doesn't
assuming
make
that's a
sense.
matter of like it's her mind in the body.
I don't I don't know if that makes any sense.
Or
Like
at least if it's not that, it's like, sure, 838 Wanda could delete someone's mouth, but would she know that if she'd never had a reason to or had the thought to do that?
uh, no, I just see here's what I'm saying. We're told that like she can handle the Scarlet Witch. Like so this Wanda in this world is being controlled by our Wanda has all the same abilities, all the same everything. She may be like a kind, nice person now, but at the
Mhm.
very least, maybe she was a superhero. Maybe she was like a villain who also worked for some sort of version of Ultron before the Ultron bots became good or whatever. She says that like she knows exactly what Wanda can and can't do. Um,
I
so
think she says that like someone who thinks they know what Wanda can and can't do, but is wrong about that.
uh, yeah, I got a tough time with that. I don't know if I buy that. That doesn't make any sense to me.
I
Um,
think it's either their experience with 838 Wanda has given them an idea of what she can do, but they might be incorrect, or they don't actually have a ton of experience with 838 Wanda and are just like talking out of their ass out of sheer misplaced confidence because they're
that makes
basic.
more sense.
Yeah. Like I think they're just being dismissive and wrong-headed and overconfident.
Yeah, that moment made me think that that Captain Marvel was actually dead. And I'm like, she doesn't die from that. Like, what are we doing here? Um, and then she doesn't show back up in the story again. So, like,
Well, we
okay,
never
fine.
come back here, so
Yeah, we never come back here. For all intents and purposes, she's practically dead, and that doesn't make any sense. Um, I
I like
I
that.
also
No, you say your thing first.
okay. I I want to appreciate the dynamic in this scene. Um, even though like part of this feels so hammy and unearned, because I know this isn't like whatever relationship they had and however similar it was to the stranger of this universe, it's just not the same person.
I like it because it's ambiguous. Like, is like clearly Steven is just saying this to rile him up, and we don't even know the degree to which Steven believes what he's saying is true. But assuming he does, like, is he right that this Mordo like helped 838 Stevens corruption along because he wanted his position on the Illuminati and like he's mad at being called out? Or is he understandably mad because it wasn't like that at all? And here's this guy like just making stuff up about you corrupting your best friend, and he's really legitimately angry. Like, I like that it could be either of those things.
I like this little just hand to hand tussle here.
Yeah. I like that double jump. But yeah, no, I totally understand. Like, would a fight like this or an argument like this mean a lot, a lot more coming from our Strange and our Mordo? Totally. But I just like this as a clever little bit of Strange is using what he does know to rile this guy up, and the audience doesn't know how true what he's saying is or isn't.
I get the impression that Strange only like not even half or barely even half believes what he's even saying to him in that moment.
Yeah, I think it's totally valid.
Um, so this is another one of those probably unintentionally hilarious deaths. Um, like the I don't think I've ever laughed harder at the killing of a character in a Marvel movie. Um,
Yeah, you and the funny deaths in this movie that I just don't have.
and it was and I had to hold myself back because I knew people would look at me like I was crazy for laughing at this in the theater. Um, but everyone else was like, like gasping across the theater, like, "Oh no! Like I can't believe they killed him." Uh, and I'm just trying to hold back laughter and snickering.
Given that the show was airing as they were making this, I really appreciate the tiny detail of the TV set in amongst all the rubble and the TV set is playing the first episode of WandaVision. Like that
That's
imagery.
amazing. I never even noticed that detail.
Yeah, because like in episode 8 of that show, you see the TV still playing next to the bomb that doesn't go off, and it's playing the Mary Tyler Moore show. And I find that imagery so powerful. And I think that scene is so like that is the core of this character is that bomb next to that TV set. And I'm glad that it got to appear in this movie.
Yep, call me a psychopath. I will never stop laughing at Xavier's in this movie.
Yeah, man, I don't know what to say to that.
Like it's and the thing is, I can go back and watch his death in X-Men Last Stand and still be like horrifically like depressed by it. But
Hmm.
in this movie, the way they do it, I don't know. I just laugh.
Well, terrifying monster face Wanda might have something to do with it. I don't know.
Like the monster face and just like the eye open and him kind of just looking like a dead chicken on the in the
Yeah.
seat. Um, and then we're gonna have this. We got this chase scene coming up. It's very horror. Um,
Yeah.
and as someone who aspires to make a horror movie, I definitely want to try and emulate that. It's very well done.
Hmm. And again, to give credit to America's role in this movie, uh, I do think both Christine and Strange need that kind of like outside party who can really look at his actions across this movie and say, you're not like the other Stranges. They don't matter. Especially after we got the scene of him seeing, like, there's a version of himself that got corrupted by the Darkhold, that he just had this whole room full of people saying, Wanda's not the danger here, you are. And clearly, he's got the perspective and also the self-confidence that he's not taking their words to heart, but it's good for him to have someone after all that who's emphatically in his corner and is like, even if that happened to that Strange, you're better, you're different, like you're okay. Why they stopped running here, I'm not sure.
Um, it, I'm assuming so we can have this cool little horror scene. Oh,
Well,
I like
definitely for that, but like why though?
it would make more sense if Christine was trying to open up the next door and it was jamming for whatever reason.
We start doing this thing where like we're in slow motion now. If we just had it where they like stopped for a second and that was all in slow motion, but I think maybe they like wanted to ease us into slow motion for some reason.
For this jump scare. Well, what's goofy about it is I don't know if you were paying attention to this, but in that scene, like just a few shots ago, when America Chavez like first starts like talking, we still have the slow mo droplets of water going behind her.
Do we? I never noticed that.
Yeah, so like she starts talking, and I'm like, okay, yeah, that's that's so goofy.
Huh, that's
We're
weird.
keeping the slow mo effect going, but we forgot that that shot's not actually supposed to be slow mo. She just got little slow mo rain droplets going behind her as she's just like talking.
Unless the idea is that the slow-mo rain droplets are something that Wanda's doing, but that's not really conveyed properly.
It's not. I also don't know if that makes any sense. Like, why is she futzing around with the water? She doesn't do anything with it.
And like this is again a thing where like I get why we gave the audience the reminder of the watch and that it came from Christine specifically,
Mhm.
because the fact that she's still holding on to it and the fact that that is their like passage into the waypoint, it's our first real like solid indication that some feeling or some attachment is still there from her.
Do we think? I mean, it will be interesting to do this yet again because we did this with Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, where it's like our hero doesn't actually get the girl, and he's kind of just got to be okay with himself and move forward. Um, do we do we think that that's probably the path that we go with for Strange, or he ends up with some kind of version of Rachel? Not Rachel. I'm sure. Sorry. Um,
Christine.
Christine. Yeah, I don't know why I said Rachel. Rachel.
I mean, we do that with Thor having to say goodbye to Jane again at the end of Love and Thunder. Like someone mentioned that this phase of Marvel has really been like the phase of the breakup that you never quite get over.
Yeah,
But
you don't get the happy girl, and you're gonna die alone.
we do it in No Way
That's not,
Home. But I think we don't set up Clea in the post-credit sequence played by a massive actress like Charlize Theron if we're not then going to go that route, because that's like the
I could
Doctor's
see that being really cool.
yeah, that's like the Doctor Strange love interest in the comics, and like depending on how they characterize her, the whole thing could be like they are compatible in a way that he and Christine just never were. So this is interesting, and I think it's something that maybe suffers for being too subtle, but I'm not
Mhm.
sure how you fix it or if there's a better way to do it. Because the idea is we go through this movie looking for the Book of Vishanti, which is the book that gives any sorcerer what they need. And we see the one page that gets burnt up when Wanda like blasts it, and it's a page that has America Chavez star on it. And the idea is that that's supposed to convey to Strange that what he needs is to let go of his like sense of control and trust America to fix the problem. But I don't think that image by itself communicates that to the audience, but I also don't know how you emphasize it without dialogue that's super super clunky.
I yeah, I don't know.
I also don't know if you need to emphasize it because like clearly we get the point. But it just it the one thing it would solve is, like, the problem that I initially had my first couple of viewings, which is just that the book is such an obvious MacGuffin, and when we destroy it and then don't mention it after it's destroyed, it feels kinda like, "Okay, we just had this book here as a plot driver and nothing else."
Yeah, but part of me wonders, is there any scenario where the book even works?
Yeah. And, like, I mean, if what Strange needs is to let America handle it and the book tells him that, it's like, okay, is it gonna would it have played any different than it ends up playing out?
Exactly, yeah. Like if they had like, I don't know, just 20 minutes, like it took Wanda 20 minutes to even get to the compound. Strange was somehow able to ditch the Illuminati and get America in there, and they had 20 minutes alone with the book. That how different is this story?
Yeah. This is some great imagery of like
Hey,
this
this is gorgeous.
gigantic yeah, this gigantic red moon behind this like decrepit sanctum sanctorum.
So I think I'm actually okay. You know what? Let me choose my words carefully here. Um, I don't think I'm liking the movie a huge degree more than I was the last time I watched it. Probably. Well, let me go back again. That's not actually true. I'm having a pretty solid viewing of this film as we're talking about it.
I'd
Um,
also say that we are just now entering the best part of it, so
yes, yes we are. Yes we are. Um, I'm very hyped about this portion of the movie. It's a really strong third act.
Hmm. And this conversation right here is actually what I'm planning to make the video about. So for those listening, like at some point after this gets posted, I'm going to be making a video about why I love this scene in particular. And I really love the approach to bringing up Donna, which is like it's his origin, not his origin, but it's like his backstory from the comics. It's all accurate. It's the like his sister fell in the river, the frozen river, and they weren't able to save her. And I love the fact that it does not come up in the first film. We do not get it visualized. It's like this is where it really becomes clear how many walls Strange still has put up, and those include to the audience. Like the audience does not get the privilege of seeing this intimate defining moment for him. He could only ever talk about it with himself.
It's one of those strong one of the strong arguments for tell don't show,
Mhm.
that I've seen. It in a lot of ways, it reminds me of, the conversation between Punisher and Daredevil in the cemetery during
Yep.
season 2 of Daredevil, where like there's power in not showing that and just letting a strong character and a strong actor just talk this through with someone on screen.
Yeah, because the thing about tell don't show is that there's meaning in who is the person choosing to tell and why them, why not anyone else?
Exactly. And even the stuff in John Wick, like in the most recent film, there's so much you can just feel so much history between Kane and John in performance,
Mhm.
and in just like little offhanded comments that are made, and like you can just feel that these people have like this deep, rich, like lived in history that you weren't privy to actually seeing, but it's still very, very vibrant and present in the story.
And again, the point I made with 838 Strange were like, this is again what Strange looks like if he's as corrupted as Wanda is. He's more low key. He seems more reasonable to start with. Like he almost seems like more scared of our Strange than he is of him. But then we get to this moment where he's like, yeah, I came back home and thought about, am I happy? And then my response to that was like, no, I'm not. Let me see if I can find other worlds where I am. Oh, these other strangers aren't happy either. Let me systematically put them out of their misery by murdering them. Like where Wanda's like issue manifests as her just destroying everything around her, all of Steven's like issues end up getting self-directed. He directs all of his destruction inward and towards other versions of himself, and it's just as horrifying. This scene was also another like late addition, and this was another one where Cumberbatch had a lot of input because he and Waldron were working like on set really close, like coming up with this whole dialogue. Because the original plan was that instead of getting tossed into this like destroyed like universe where an incursion had happened, uh, he and Christine had gotten like thrown into a more peaceful universe where they met a Strange who was a street magician who didn't actually have any magic, and it was going to be more of a low key like sit down dialogue with this kind of like simpler Strange who had his life more figured out, even though he didn't have any powers.
I can't imagine that. Um, I wouldn't trade this
Yeah,
for.
no. I am interested to like live in the alternate universe where that happened, but this is too good. And I'll say about the Donna thing, just because I had this was like a random thought that I had the first time I watched this movie, because seeing this for the first time, I wasn't aware of the comic backstory. I know that Sam Raimi is pretty open about when other movies, like especially like older classics, influence his stuff. And there was a thought that I had watching this for the first time where I was like, is having the sibling who falls into the ice supposed to be like an It's a Wonderful Life reference? Because that's another movie dealing with like alternate life paths and stuff.
Mhm.
This is one of those things that I find like slightly annoying where like there's a version of the track that plays in the movie that's not exactly the track that is on the OST, and it's like I want the tiny like differences that this the version in the film has, the music fight that they have.
Um, yeah, the eye thing is also very Evil Dead.
Mhm.
Uh,
And like that music fight itself was freaking awesome.
yeah, that was pretty cool and inventive. Yeah.
Wake up! Wong just
And
gets put through the freaking ringer in this movie.
he does, and then he is rewarded for going through hell and basically just being everyone's favorite disgruntled grandpa in She-Hulk.
Hey, he gets to win his court case.
The design for these monsters is really cool.
Yeah. Ah, jeez. Her screams are always really intense.
Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah. Well, you see, the thing about that is,
You listen to the commentary. Did they say if it's gonna take more than killing me to kill me? Is that like something they planned, or is that ad lib?
that was planned. The go back to hell line. I forget if they say if that was Rachel McAdams' idea or if they just really praise her for selling it well.
Yeah, like the go back to hell line I find funny. Just because even though like I know that she knows is strange, this doesn't strike me as a person who actually believes in like the any kind of like Judeo-Christian like heaven, hell.
Yeah, no,
And
but I don't think that line is indicative of that. I think she's just doing a badass action one liner.
yeah, but I think I don't know what makes it funny for me is like the insinuation, at least in my head, is that like she's not religious. She's like not actually religious. So like for her to say that in this context, even though she's seeing like spirits and demons and everything, is just still kind of funny.
Hmm. This is so cool,
Oh,
man.
yeah, this is ignorantly epic. Like
Like as soon as he said who said they had to be living, I was like, "Ooh, yeah." That's like one of my hypest moments in this whole franchise. So the idea that they were going to like possess the dead body was Waldron's idea, and it was another thing that came pretty late because they were like, "Oh man, we wrote ourselves into a corner. How are they actually going to get back to save her?" It's like, "Oh, we have a dead body. Like, let's put him in there." and then Raimi added the whole Souls of the Damned thing. Like, this is all Raimi.
The power of collaboration.
Yep.
And then
And,
like
like, I totally understand, and, like, not even just understand, like, I agree with the fact that we end this movie with the third eye and then, "Oh, no, it's fine," in the post-credit scene, but they definitely talk about, like, if they get the chance to be the ones doing the third movie, that they're like, "This is all teeing up for the idea that, like, Mordo's right, like, the bill comes due between this movie and the first movie. Strange has consistently solved his problems by, like, skirting the rules and bending the rules of the universe basically to his convenience, and come the third movie, he's like, he can't keep getting away with that."
the bill will finally come due. Yeah, I want to see that whole thing paid off in the third film.
And, like, it's a
And
great for like, having a different writer and director, like, it's a very consistent understanding of this character, and, like, it's a very nice uniting theme between these two stories. It's it's so cool. Like, it's exactly the right kind of cheesy cool. Like, I know some people who, like, this is where this movie loses them because it's so hardcore Raimi, like just leaning into the cheese and the electric guitar sting, but I eat this up for breakfast, man.
same, same. It doesn't, for me, it doesn't, you know, it's not too tonally inconsistent for me. Like I really, really enjoy this.
Mhm.
Soul bending is so epic.
It's
I'm just
like
gonna make a
energy
cape out of it.
bending, but metal.
You know what I also like though
Mm,
is we get to this fight and it's not like a super drawn out thing.
mhm.
In strange like and debatably a more decrepit and not even particularly powerful. So like as cool as this is, he's not necessarily any more powerful just because he's got these souls with him. Um, and like he's still clearly like not a straight up match for Wanda. He
Yeah,
surprises her with, huh?
I'm trying, like, you're right, he surprises her, but they don't, like, fight. Like, Wanda never gets beaten in this movie. I'm trying to think of if any other MCU movie, it, like, deviates as much as this one does from, like, the idea of the 3rd act, like, fireworks show action finale.
Yeah, because this really isn't that.
Yeah, and I mean, like, no fault of the other movies, these are all action movies to one degree or another, but this is the one that's most like, we're not here in the 3rd act, like, having a fight scene, like, we got our 3rd act, like, awesome spectacle, and it's just the idea that any of this stuff is happening. Like, we're not here to have a big blowout fireworks action scene, we're very much zeroing in on character. Like, what does Strange need? What does Wanda need? And that's what this scene is about. And, like, all of these things, like, like, coming up to Wanda and calling her a murderer, and, like, they're surrounding her, so unlike when Strange tells her that she's crazy and killing people, she can't just, like, avoid it or deflect or, like, focus on something else.
Oh, that's so sick.
Yeah.
Her hand just goes like bursting out, and all the other hands are like grabbing it and pulling it away. This is this is questionable. Um, this whole like pep talk thing. Well, not all of it, but a good chunk of this pep talk, and then she's able to stick it to Wanda, and I'm just like, yeah, okay, all right.
Well, what specifically is the issue there?
Um, so it bothers me that the whole time, like, so like they're running from Wanda. So like apparently Chavez can just straight up take Wanda in a fight,
Well, she
and all this
can.
time,
She can
huh?
surprise her and land a couple punches.
Oh yeah, 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 yeah. She doesn't actually end up beating Wanda. I remember now. But just this feels way too cheesy and unearned to me.
I think about it again as being all about Strange's character. And like I haven't put it in these terms over the course of this commentary, but again, what his like whole internal issue and like his unhappiness and his sort of self-directed like issues, what that all manifests as is the thing that he's had a problem with since the beginning of his first movie, which is that he's a control freak. And even in this movie, we see aspects of like him needing to micromanage and control things, and especially with the corrupted strangers, like again, they're the dark extreme of that. And so what yeah, so what he really needs in this moment is just to cede control to another person, and internally for him that's like part of the stepping stones of him growing and him learning to like tackle his own unhappiness. And so like this is all a character beat for him. Like what he needs is to trust in another person to be able to solve the problem, and he lets America hold the knife basically.
Mhm.
And this is just, oh, this just kills me. Like we just got done with a whole like 10-15 minute string of great scenes, but this is my favorite scene in this movie. And Raimi talks about working with Elizabeth Olsen and how he would always worry sometimes when he asked her to do another take or go more intense, and she would take him aside and be like, "Sam, you need to understand that I am a bottomless well of emotion when it comes to my acting. Never be afraid to ask me to go harder or do another take." And like, however many takes it took for them to get the bit that's coming up, just perfect, 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 perfect. Like, this is the moment that makes her character in this movie.
I relate to that. Um, so that's very very interesting and lovely to hear her say. Um, it like how far do you want to push actors, and how many especially for like very emotionally taxing scenes.
Hmm. And so, like, this is why I bristle at anyone who says that this movie didn't utilize the multiverse well. Because again, it's all about that holding up a mirror to the characters. And I feel like in another movie, like in a weaker movie, we would have just had it like she scares her kids, she realizes that they're scared of her, and that's what gets her to realize that she needs to correct everything. But like that's part of it. But that just tees her up for this, which is that she
That
sees.
forgiveness.
Yeah, she sees a version of herself who's capable of that forgiveness. And like she sees a version of herself who still is a truly decent person. And you can see the look in Elizabeth Olsen's eyes of like, I used to be that. Where did that part of me go? And like, look at how badly I've changed from this person in front of me right now. Oh my God, I have to fix this. Kills me every time.
And that's where I'm like, in terms of like everything involving Wanda, that this movie pretty much delivers for me. Like I just to echo everything you were saying, like um, I tears were definitely streaming down my face on first viewing.
Yeah. Dude, you not looking okay, man. She really beat your ass.
If they were allowed to make the DC joke, I just I picture some like alternate version of the movie where she calls him Two Faced.
Wow. We got our DC references out with Eternals. We can't have any more. At least not so
um,
close.
yeah, I'm like I hadn't even like the one in Eternals wasn't even funny to me. Um, but I think Two Face would have been great.
Well, we get two in Eternals. We get the Superman reference and the Alfred reference.
I saw a lot of people like particularly these are like diehard WandaVision fans bristling pretty hard at this conclusion. Um, and I'm like, guys, like she's not one, she's not dead. Um, but two, I like that she's at a place now where like we got to see her do the villain thing. But she had her epiphany moment, realized the path she was going down was wrong. Um, and like, where do you go from here? In the redemption story is always tricky, right? Because when you have a character that's just blatantly murdered scores of people, um, short of being able to snap your fingers and bring them all back, there's no real atoning for that. Um,
Or if there is, it's a long, hard process that we usually don't have time to portray in movies.
yeah,
So if that bit with Wanda is my favorite scene in the movie, this is probably my second favorite. Because again, and like this is a thing that uh Guardians, like all of the Guardians movies, I think really get rightly praised for. And it's like not even just unique among this franchise, but I think unique among 21st century blockbusters often in general, to have a moment where your protagonist just stops and without a hint of irony or like obfuscation or again putting up walls just openly gets sentimental and emotional and like this is how I feel. And the fact that he's like, it's not that I don't want to care about anyone, it's not that I don't want people to care about me, I just get scared. That's so like so earnest and just emotionally honest, and you so rarely get that level of just frankness from any of these characters. And it's like
and
that's,
genuine vulnerability.
yeah, vulnerability, that's, yeah. And it's like that's why he can be such a control freak, that's why letting other people handle his problems or even admitting that he has problems is difficult for him. He's just scared to like what caring about people and what letting people care for him would mean. And to have him say that and admit that is the first step in him really, really growing up as a person. and I think it's a really powerful note to end his arc on.
Yeah, I do too. Um, I think I'm definitely looking forward to seeing where they take him next. I mean, as we were talking about earlier, the throwing in the God, I forget her name, the character that Charlize is playing.
Clea.
Yeah, throwing in Clea the way they do shortly after the movie ends, it's you're sending very very mixed signals with him just walking around with the eye and everything's hunky dory. Um, I, I hope, despite how jarring that is, that they do follow up on the bill comes due, um, because like him having that moment with Christine, um, and then going into the next movie where it's like you've made a lot of really really good progression as a person, as a character. Um, but even despite all of that, like however good a lot of the things you've done are, it's still going to come with negative consequences,
Hmm.
and a lot of the same way that we had to see Tom Holland Spider-Man deal with in No Way Home. Like, yeah, you corrected a lot of the wrong decisions that you made, but it's left you with um nothing. Your girlfriend's gone. No one remembers you. Your aunt's gone. Well,
Yeah.
your aunt's is gone. Your girlfriend just doesn't remember you. But ostensibly she's kind of gone. Like that relationship you had's gone. And you're just kind of by yourself.
Hmm. And I get on this viewing why you're kind of cold on America Chavez because like comparing her to other characters and similar like my brain always goes to Civil War, which had Spider-Man and Black Panther make their first appearance as supporting characters basically, and they leave such a great impression in that role that like that's kind of a standard that I hold some of these two as like, okay, America Chavez is gonna be a big deal going forward, presumably, and she doesn't make as great of an impression as those two did, but I really, again, like come down on really liking her both as a really good performance. I think that actress gives a really good performance, and I really like her as a very necessary support for Steven's story here because that moment of I'm glad I fell into your universe, like me too. Like that feels a little generic when you don't think about it. But if you
Hmm.
really consider the implications, like, yeah, it's the fact of America Chavez landing in his universe that is what stopped our Strange from ending up like Dark Strange. Because otherwise, he would have just gone home, sat down, and came to the same like self loathing realization, but he gets to meet this person who observes his actions and is like, no, you can be happy because you're not like the other Stevens. So, like, I think she's a really well utilized supporting character here.
Yeah, that's fair. Um, she's she's a walking plot device that is servicing our lead character in a way that I wasn't giving as much credit as maybe it deserved previously.
Yeah. As long as there's like an emotional angle there to offset like the plot device nature of it. I'd say that Riri in Wakanda Forever is much the same way. Where it's like we've
Um,
built our plot around this person, but also there's a reason that they're here from a character storytelling perspective.
and honestly, Riri kind of grades on me more on Wakanda Forever because on top of feeling like a walking plot device, she also feels like a walking stereotype.
That is interesting. If we ever do a wait, have we? I'm
No,
starting to lose.
we haven't done
Have
a
we?
commentary on Wakanda Forever. I think we did a spoiler cast. I think.
Yeah, we did. Okay, so if we do a commentary on that movie, I'll be interested to hear you say more about that. But yeah, I don't know. I freaking love this movie. I think it makes some choices that I wouldn't, but it's all comparatively small stuff and like stuff that I used to really bristle against. I do not have that on repeat viewing so much. This scene though still probably a mistake,
Yeah, huge.
especially since they've kind of put themselves into a corner where either like you'd assume that whatever Strange appears in next, it would be picking up directly from this. And if it were me, I'd have like Doctor Strange 3 picking up immediately from this, or at least in the same status quo. So now we're kind of in a situation where until Doctor Strange 3 happens, he either can't appear anywhere else or we have to contrive it to where like this scene isn't in order chronologically, and like we just say that this scene happened in between whatever else in Doctor Strange 3. I don't know, it's a really weird place to leave yourself in, I think.
Yeah, it's so bizarre. Like just um I think if it was me, what I would have done is have him stumble back into the Sanctum Sanctorum, and he's flipping through books, uh, trying to figure out a way to deal with, uh, the growth of this new eye,
Yeah,
and then
like
he
have him
just
be in the same outfit, like this is him moments later.
moments later he's stumbling and fumbling through books, trying to figure out a way to ease his pain and get rid of this eye, and then she just shows up, doesn't say a word, and then you cut like who is this? Give it some mystery, give it some mystique. But for it to just be happening in broad daylight on a sidewalk, like it, and he's
Where he's
fine how
walking
he's
down
yeah,
casually.
it just feels so awkward and jarring. But
Yeah.
anywho, yeah, this was a good commentary. I am definitely glad that we did this. Definitely gave me an appreciation for some points in the film that I didn't have before. Um, so thanks for that.
Yeah, I will
And I
consider
and I
my
and I
mission half accomplished.
yeah, I still, you know what? I like this movie. I like the movie. Um, I can comfortably say that now, despite the issues that I have with it. Um, but yeah, as it just doesn't. As someone who was looking forward to this more so than they were looking forward to No Way Home, or
Mm,
literally any other movie in Phase Four, it didn't quite live up to what I was expecting. But overall, it's still pretty solid. Still pretty
yeah,
solid. And
I think
so
we
we
can
have
probably call it there because we don't need to talk over the Bruce Campbell punching himself.
absolutely not. No, and I didn't even talk about that scene in the movie just because I don't even like that scene in the movie. We were talking about things that are more interesting than that. But yeah, next time, guys, we will probably do. Well, actually, I know it's been a bit since you've seen it, and it's been a few days now since I've seen it. But I do want to do like a proper video on Guardians Volume 3. It deserves a discussion. I do want to talk about that film more. But then also, you guys can expect us to cover Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse,
Oh yeah.
um, because both of us are definitely seeing that opening night. And if it's as good as I'm expecting it is, then you're not going to get me to be able to shut up about it.
Yeah, so looking forward to that. But for now, I think we can call it, and I'm going to do some work things. So thank you for listening,
Yeah, thanks,
and
guys. Thanks for listening. Comment, share, and let us know what you thought of the movie.
peace out.